Hello and welcome to Jen's Ink Spot. I'm happy to be here with you today to share with you some new products from Catherine Pooler. I'm going to show you how to make this card that I made here using a new stamp set called Geo Curves Stamp. So this Geo Curves Stamp Set has lots of images that are in curves. And the first thing I thought of when I saw all of these were rainbows. I thought how fun to figure out a way to use this set to make rainbows. A lot of the stamps are all one image though, and so this bottom left hand stamp here that you see and this top stamp that you see, one has 3 lines, one has 4 lines. I decided to cut those apart. I used a really sharp pair of cutter bee scissors and it cuts very nicely. They're short tipped, so I didn't have any problem cutting in between each of the images that were attached on the stamp set. I didn't trim the images. I kept them exactly how they were after I cut them so that I could take the next stamp that was below it and line it up so that if I wanted to use all those images together as one stamp like it was meant to be, I could easily put them back together and stamp them once and they would still be attached. So here's an example of one of the images that has not been cut. You can see where the grooves are, and again I just cut in between those grooves. For this card I'm using Grass Skirt, Party Dress, All That Jazz, Sauna, and Blackjack ink, and I'm using that bottom left hand corner stamp that I showed you and the middle stamp at the top for this particular card. As you can see, they nest together really well. The one on the bottom is the one that I used first, and then the one that was at the top in the center, that's the stamp I stamp second. So I'm going to start with Grass Skirt ink and stamp the top image, and then I'm going to nest the second one that's a slight bit smaller underneath, and then I'm just going to continue rotating the colors. Each color will get stamped twice except for the very last color, which is Sauna. So you can just see how easy it is to line them up, and if you don't stamp them completely perfect, it doesn't matter because it adds to the way that the stamp's made. It just has such a fun rainbow look to it, and you can do so many color schemes and use this in so many different ways. This is actually a different color scheme than I used in the card that I showed you at the beginning of this video because I wanted to change it up a little bit, so I went with a different color scheme and used it this way instead. So as you can see, I just continue to go down the line with the different colors. When I get to Sauna, there's only one stamp left, and so I just stamp Sauna ink once, and then I am ready for the highlights. Taking a look at the stamp set again, you can see that there's dotted and dashed curves also, and I thought these make perfect highlight images in my rainbow. So I used the dotted lines with black ink and I stamped it in between 2 of the layers. It doesn't really matter what layer you choose, and then I'm using blackjack ink to stamp a smaller one towards the bottom. And so by the time you finish, you have your rainbow, but then you've also added these really cool accents which just give it a little bit different look. So now that I've stamped my rainbow, I have an idea of how much space it's going to take up. So now I'm going to go and fill in the rest of my card base by stamping more rainbows. So I'm just going to stamp first the top of the rainbow and then leave space to be able to complete the rainbow so that I can stamp these rainbows out a lot quicker than I stamped my first one, because I'll be able to use the same image to complete all the other rainbows on that page. So I just continue to do this over and over until my rainbow card front is completely finished. You'll see here in a little bit that by the time I finished that there were some spaces that I needed to fill the gaps on, and I will just go back and I will fill those in later. So like you can see now, this really doesn't take a whole lot of time. It goes pretty quickly. I've already finished the green and now I'm on to Party Dress, and I just continue to stamp these out. Like I said, it goes pretty quickly. Once I have my card panel finished, I'm going to take the postage stamp dies that were previously released, and I take the largest stitch die and I'm going to cut this panel down a little bit because I'm going to want to layer it on a card base. And so I'm using Post-it note tape to hold it down where I want it to die cut at, and I'll run it through my die cut machine and it will be the size that I want, and it'll have the nice stitched edges as well. Here it is. As you can see, it's finished, but there's some spaces that I need to fill in, and so I'm going to stamp partial rainbows in those two areas. Here I have already completed it, and I'm ready to add on the next elements. Off camera, I went ahead and cut some happy die cuts, and this is from the new Happy ×3 dies. These are a lot of fun. Comes with a shadow happy, and then an outline happy, and then kind of a little bit of a fatter happy. And so I used the thinnest happy script, and I've cut it in 4 different colors that match my cardstock. And I'm just trying to decide which look I like the best. I liked all of them a little bit, but the one that I felt popped the most was definitely the pink one. And so I chose it and positioned it at the bottom of my card this time. To adhere the die cut, I'm going to use Designer Dries Clear glue, and what I like about this glue is that it has a fine tip that you can buy with it, and so for dies like this, it goes on really well. I'm also going to use a sentiment from the new So Happy Sentiment Stamp Set, and I chose the Sentiment For You. That is going to go under the happy to finish the sentence. I'm using an acrylic rectangle block by Catherine Pooler to line up my sentiment. If you don't have these blocks, I highly recommend them because they are wonderful for lining up sentiments because they have the grid lines on them. I stamped the sentiment in the grass skirt ink that we are using for the rainbow, and now I am going to adhere everything on my card front. I use these tweezers that help me position the sentiment so I don't have to get glue all over my fingers, which then I transfer onto my card. So I can just grab it with these tweezers and it makes it nice and easy. So once I put my sentiment on where I want it, I'm going to attach double stick tape to the back of the For You sentiment, and then I'm going to adhere that to my card front. I like to always pop something up on my card because it adds a little bit of texture, it adds some detail, it adds interest, and it just fits really nicely over the happy. So this is what it looks like, and I'm going to put it on a piece of blue cardstock to help it pop. And once I adhere that, then I'm going to go back in and use this stamp set to add these little black cluster dots around the card. I'm using the Tilly's Magic Garden stamp set to add these little clusters. It's actually a flower center, but I like looking for these little stamp images in my sets because it's easy to use to add a little pop to your cards. I could just feel like it needs something to fill in some of those gaps, and so the black contrast with all the colors just really helps to brighten the card up and to add a little bit of visual interest. So I am just randomly stamping these in areas on the card that I find need a little something extra. If you don't want to do this, you could always use other sequins or something like that to add a little extra, but this is just totally easy, something that I always have in my stash. If I start looking through my stamp sets, it's easy to find, and then as you can see, it just helps the card to pop a little bit. So here I have almost everything done, but I decide that I still need to add one more element. So I have these Des Moines sequins that are in the latest Catherine Pooler release, and I'm going to use the yellow ones from this pack to add a little bit of sunshine to this card. I pour them into this little bead tray that you can get at your local craft store for pretty inexpensive, and I use my crystal picker upper to pick up the ones that I want, which makes it super easy, and then I'm going to place them on my card. I also use glue dots to attach my sequins. I have 2 different sizes, so when I use the large sequins, I use the mini dots, and when I use the smaller sequins, I use the next smaller size of dots, and it is just absolutely perfect for being able to adhere sequins quickly to your card. Don't have to mess with glue that takes time to dry, but they're immediately adhered, and it's really wonderful. The size of glue dots that I'm using for these sequins are micro glue dots, and you can find them in craft stores or you can order them online. And I also like using the glue dot dispenser because it's really simple. I keep 2 of these on my desk at all times with the different sizes of glue dots that I have, and I love just being able to reach it for it. Here is my completed card. You can see the one I made today and also the one that I made previously. They're very similar, only different color schemes. So thank you so much for joining me today on Jen's Ink Spot. If you're interested in any of the products that I've shown today, check under Show More in the video description and I'll have links to everything that I've used. Thank you again for joining me today.